I wasn't.
I've heard of it.
It was bad. I played hooky today.
Have you really?
I heard
Not on
you were.
TV,
Really?
yes.
Fantastic. That's good to hear. So my name's Ted, and I work for Oregon Saves. And Oregon Saves, in a nutshell, is a retirement program for private businesses that is managed by the state, and it's designed for businesses that don't currently have a qualified retirement plan in place. So being like a 401k, a pension, something along those lines. And basically, the reason that the state created this thing, and they're the first state to do so, there's lots of states that are kind of doing the same, really close behind, is because they wanted to make sure that everybody had access to a retirement plan at work. All employees, anyone who's working in Oregon, if they work somewhere, they're going to have some type of retirement plan. So if you're a business that doesn't, Oregon Saves is a way to do that. And basically inside of it, so I come from the 401k world. I used to work on 401ks. If an employer had one with the company I worked for, I'd go talk to them about how to make it better, more people participating, better investments, that sort of thing. So I was a consultant on that side for a little while. That was tough. My company charged a lot of money, and we weren't bashful about it. But this is different than a 401k. So inside of this, employees don't get a 401k account, they get an IRA. Pretty simple. In a 401k account, the 401k is essentially, it's owned by the employee, but the employer controls that account. So the employee has to take that with them, and there's a process to do so. With a Roth IRA, inside of this, it's always the employees. The state doesn't own that account, the employer doesn't own the account, I don't own the account, the employee does. So wherever they go, that account's still theirs, just as if they went across the street to a bank or whomever and open an IRA. Is everyone familiar with IRAs? Okay. So it's after tax. If an employee ever wants their money back, they can get their money that they put in back tax and penalty free. Super flexible. The only thing that's subject to tax and penalty is the growth. But by default, if the employee doesn't go in and make their investment changes, by default the first $1,000 goes into a capital preservation fund. So if they're going to take a withdrawal, likely they're going to do it within the first $1,000 that they save, and there's not going to be a whole lot of growth on there, so that it's not going to be too much of an issue. And the reason that the state decided to go that route is because they didn't want people to go in, have it be their first time investing, have their account lose value, then sell out and have less than they put in. So at least they can get what they put in. So for the employer, this is a mandatory thing. So it's passed by law. If you're an employer, you have to offer something to employees. If you can't offer something to employees, use Oregon Saves. It is no cost to the employer. The state won't send you a bill. The only cost to the employer is the cost to facilitate it and run payroll. And pretty much after this startup, or after the, well, let's go through the process. So the state sends you a notice and says, hey, we see that you employ 10 people in the state of Oregon. Can you please facilitate Oregon Saves, or let us know that you have a 401k or some other similar retirement plan. If you have a retirement plan, you just mark exempt, easy peasy, done, good to go. If not, then you just register as an employer, build your employees, and then 30 days thereafter start facilitating contributions for those employees that decide to save. Pretty simple.
They can opt out though.
Yes.
The employees don't have to participate.
Yep.
The employer does.
Yep. Completely optional to employees. Yep. So an account's going to be created and ready to receive money for them. But if they don't ever fund it, then it just sits out there ready to receive money. Wherever they go, if they go to another employer that facilitates Oregon Saves, it's just going to be the same account. So when this starts, there is an automatic enrollment provision. And it basically says, within the 30 days that you register and build employees, the employees don't make a decision, they save at 5% as a default. Okay? But we send out, the administrators send out communication directly to employees, either via email or to their address, and say, hey, you got 30 days to decide what to do. If you want to save more or less than 5%, be our guest. Or if you want to opt out completely, here's how to do so. Really simple process. Go claim your account, move that percentage up or down or to zero. They can also choose their investments in there too. There's only 3 investments available inside there. So if you think about a 401k, you as the employer would have to go select all the investments in there. You could have depends on who your record keeper is, but you could have 40 investments in there. So for somebody who's new to saving for retirement, that's a really daunting task to go in and pick your investments. And that's one of the reasons a lot of people don't. A lot of people don't go in or save for retirement because they think, I could be an expert in investing, and I'm not that person, so I'm not gonna do that right now, maybe later. What we find is later becomes never. So the plans that are really effective are the ones that auto-enroll people and put them into funds that are appropriate based on their age. So after that first $1,000, the next dollar goes into a target date fund, and that's just a portfolio built based on that person's age. So it could be, for me, I'm expected to turn 65 somewhere around 2050, or 2045. So I'd be putting in a target date 2045 fund, has lots of stocks to begin with, and then slowly sells off those stocks and buys bonds in there. So the cost is bared by the people who use the accounts, and the cost roughly comes to be 1% of assets, and that comes from investment return. So we never deduct it or bill the employees or anything like that. It just is factored into their investment return. So if the investments return 20%, which a lot of them did last year, employees receive 19%. And they don't see the difference. They just see, hey, here's your net return on the growth on your assets, that sort of thing. And they're gonna have a personalized rate of return as well, because as they're putting money in, they're investing at different points in the market, that sort of thing. Whereas if they just put a whole big chunk in there all at once, then it would be a little bit different than dollar cost averaging is what we call that, but getting into the weeds. So yeah, it's just a deduction from payroll that goes into an IRA. Questions on that? Good overview? Everything we talked about earlier? Group that was with me earlier? Yeah.
So when the employee wants to, let's say, change the investment allocation, or they want to withdraw money, buy a house, or they have questions about taxation on a withdrawal, or penalty on a withdrawal, they're not going back to the employer, right? The employer's job is really just to get it set up in the beginning and to do the payroll auto deduction and deposit into the employee's account. And then the employee's on their own. The
Yes.
employer has no role.
Yes, correct.
Okay. So
Yeah, so and that's purposeful. You know, this isn't supposed to be a burden for the employer.
Right.
And even if you've sponsored a 401k plan, if you're an employer, you don't want to be answering those questions, because you could become a fiduciary to that person's account if you unknowingly offered advice to that person.
Right.
And that's a very blurred line, especially nowadays. Even if the person perceives you as receiving advice, if they could prove that, and they took a dip in their account because of something you told them, or so on and so forth, they could come after you. In this, we keep it very far away.
So who does that role then? Is it the state Oregon Saves office?
Yep, so the state treasury is the fiduciary to this program.
Right.
So they control the investments, they did all the hiring of the administrator, and they basically oversee it to make sure everybody's doing their job. And anytime they could replace any one of those pieces. So for any employee questions, you'd certainly want to direct them back to Oregon Saves, call in, because we have experts to help them through processes like withdrawals, tax ramifications. You mentioned somebody buying a house. If this is a first-time home purchase, they can actually get access to their growth tax and penalty free as well. So that's a pretty, there are some things in there that certainly employees want to call in and
There'll be a website.
Yep.
They can go and they can track, they can open up their account just like you do banking online.
Sure.
Same idea.
Yep, they got a retirement calculator on there.
Right.
Feed them all the information they're going to get on their statements, but we're also going to send out quarterly and then an annual statement to all employees,
Right.
just like they would a 401k account, banking account, something like that. Yeah.
So the companies that have had their first rollout,
Mhm.
are most employees participating, or
Yeah.
are most of them opting out?
And this is a really interesting thing, because you would think that it depends on industry, all that kind of stuff, but here's where the hinge is. The hinge on whether you get high participation and people contributing a lot is the attitude of the employer. So if the employer feels and exuberates, what do I want to say, positivity towards this, employees will feed off that and they'll want to participate. But if the employer says, and hands them a sheet and says, here's your opt-out form, you'll get everybody to opt out. And so if you let the program work the way it's designed to work for employees, it works really well. And I think the percentage of participation is around 75% of employees stay in. We do have some companies where we're looking at it and the state's kind of trying to take a hands-off approach to it. We set this up for you. If you use it as designed, it's going to work for you and your employees. We have some where, you know, it's not 75%, it's a lot less. And so you kind of, you know, there's a story to be told there. We don't know exactly what's going on, but they're not using it as intended. Or they're using it as an opt-in, and people, it's just hard for people to sign a piece of paper that says, deduct a portion of my pay, and they don't fully understand maybe what an IRA is. So, depends, but I would say in the qualified plan space, if a plan rolls out with automatic enrollment, default investment provisions, I mean, roughly only 10% of employees will opt out. And the reason for that being is a lot of plans have a match. Employees know that they should do that because there's a match, there's more incentive to stay in and start saving. So 90% on the qualified plan side, here just an IRA, 75. And this is a different group too. You know, you're gonna get a lot of restaurants, staffing agencies, I think agriculture, those are, you know, brings down that participation. But right now we have really, really high participation, really high. The plan's only been in place officially since January. And there was a pilot group of employers, about 50 employers ranging in size, that started this in July just to test it out and get feedback and hand-holding and all that stuff. And there's about $4 million in assets in this thing already, just in the course of 6 months, and then add on the 50 employers. We have about 35 to 40,000 accounts built. At 20,000 of those who are saving. Some of them are getting online now because the employers are registered. They're ready, they're almost to that 30-day process of getting them to start saving. Some employers dragging their feet, that sort of thing. But what we know is it's working. The average contribution rate is 5%. So if somebody goes in there, they're either gonna opt out or stick at the 5%.
And is the 5% the 5% of your after-tax take-home, or 5% of your gross pay?
Yeah, so it's calculated on gross. So we give an example of somebody who makes $800 a paycheck.
Yeah.
It's calculated on that $800, that's gross pay.
Right.
But because it's after tax, you're still taxing the full $800.
I see.
But $40 actually goes into the account. It's not 30, you know, it's not the amount after the
But
tax.
the deduction, yeah, the deduction is more than 40. Because, I mean, you're paying tax.
Correct.
Yeah, you're paying tax.
Yeah, yeah, but that won't affect the
You
actual
would have paid tax
contribution
anyway.
amount.
Yeah, that's right, you would have
yeah,
paid tax anyway.
Yeah, so Roth is, you know, you're taxed up front.
Right.
So once they take that out for retirement or a qualified distribution, they're not taxed ever again on it.
Right.
And this is one of the only places you get tax-free earnings.
On the capital, on the principal, yeah.
Yeah, and actually if you take it out for retirement, you're not taxed on the growth either.
Right.
Yeah, very, very effective way, I guess. And right now we're historically low tax rate, so.
Roth has a cap on income, right? So
Yep.
you can't, and you don't have any plan other than a Roth. So if you happen to be an employer who employs someone who makes more than the Roth cap,
Yeah,
then they can't participate,
correct.
right?
Yeah.
Is there an alternative for those people or no?
There will be.
Okay.
By the end of this year, they're looking to open it up to also pre-tax or traditional IRAs.
Right.
So essentially, somebody could have two accounts with Oregon
Right.
Saves, and they're gonna try and figure out how that works. Probably just an ID along with, because every account's linked to social.
Right.
It'd probably just be a, you know, pre-tax ID.
Right.
So yeah.
And then is the thinking that, you know, as this gets up and running and, you know, smooth sailing and, you know, the right size staffing and all sort of, that you'll have qualified plans so that employers will be able to contribute, match? Or do you know?
Will this phase into some more of like a qualified plan
More like a
aspect?
qualified plan?
Not that I know of yet. And the reason for that being is because this design is something taken actually from, it's taken down from Capitol Hill. So basically, Capitol Hill, ERISA, DOL, all these, you know,
Right.
big organizations said, if you want to do a state plan, it's got to be designed like this or like this.
I see.
So this is one of the designs.
Okay.
The other design a state could do, and I think Maryland's rolling one out like this, is what's called a MEP, or a multiple employer plan.
Mhm.
And in a multiple employer plan, it is a 401k,
Mhm.
but different businesses can adopt that big giant 401k. That makes sense?
Yeah.
So it'd be like the state's 401k plan, but as an employer, I would go adopt that plan. And whatever the state decides to do with the plan, you know, I roll that out to my employees,
Right.
and that's more of an opt-in. So I'm not sure, it remains to be seen how well that's going to work.
Because the reason I ask that question is that from the employer's point of view, you know, we're a small employer in a town like this that's so remote
Mhm.
and has, you know, we have trouble attracting and maybe retaining
Sure.
key staff.
Yeah.
And so we're always looking for ways to optimize wages that are a little bit maybe lower than the state average. But we do want to be fair and we do want to offer something that's got a little bit of a hook in it.
Sure, sure.
And, you know, 401Ks, and especially stock plans, if you could do those, you know, those do have hooks.
Oh, yeah.
And it keeps key employees in place. And so, you know, it'd be nice, but, you know, most of the businesses in this town are not that size.
Sure. And I completely agree. I think there is some hook with employer money, right? You
Right.
gotta stay here for
Yes.
3 years in order to be vested in this
Correct,
money.
It's a harder plan to administer.
Sure, absolutely. Lots of responsibility that comes with it.
Right.
And there's some liability that comes with it.
Right.
And I think when you're rolling out a benefit like this, if you draw attention to it, hey, we help you with this benefit, we facilitate this benefit, offer this benefit for you. If people know there's a retirement benefit at work, they see work as more of a career
Right.
rather than a job.
Exactly.
And we've had that comment made from employees. This is awesome, my employer is offering a retirement benefit for me. So I'm gonna stick around for a little bit longer because I like how this is rolling for me.
Except that since this is mandatory for every employer,
Yep.
you know, we're not gonna be distinguished.
Eventually, wherever they go, they're
against,
gonna
you know,
have retirement
my colleagues here, you know, everybody's gonna be offering the same
Right.
thing, right? Oh, yeah, don't let them sell you that because
Right.
you can get it at the golf course, and you can get it at the flower shop, and you can get it, you know, wherever you get the newspaper.
If we had employees.
Yeah, right. Do we get to pay ourselves?
I don't know, what the heck?
Yeah, and I think, you know, from a differentiator standpoint, there's a rollout, which is on the back of this. So if you wanna, you know, if this sounds like something, you know, well, I know I'm in wave 6, you know, you can sign up at any time.
I
Just
see.
request early registration, and
Oh, I
that
see.
way you could be a differentiator before 2020.
Okay.
You know, but at
You can
that
sign
time.
up now, you can, I
Yeah.
mean, if you.
Oh, that's
you're below-
good, even though if we're below the threshold.
Yep, absolutely. Yep, so it's open.
What about
Um,
self-employed people who don't have employees?
Employees.
Yeah, so for you, it is not mandatory, so you don't have to facilitate it, but if you wish, you certainly can.
You can.
Yeah, so that would be, you would have to
Yeah,
request
that's
your
nice.
invite, and then we can send you that, get you all set up. Yeah, and we've had quite a few reach out to us and do that.
So how do we do it? Because like, we don't have payroll.
Yeah, so it would just be contributions coming from you.
No.
Yeah, so basically, yeah, you don't make deductions, but you make a contribution into your account.
Okay.
Yeah, just the same way you would, but you don't have to worry about the payroll side as much, and, yeah, depending on what kind of, how it rolls there.
That sounds good.
Yeah. So I went through
That
accounts.
would be attractive to a lot of self-employed people.
Yeah, it would
we
be.
have a lot of them here.
Who don't want to
Yeah.
administer, yeah, they don't want to.
Mhm.
Yeah. And it would be good too, because if they bring on employees, you understand how it works, you can tell them, you know, all that sort of good stuff, rather than trying to start up a separate simple for yourself, where you take on more responsibility. Yeah. Yeah, and I think the idea here, a lot of people ask me, what is the state getting from this? There's some hook, what is the state getting? And there is no real hook. So the state, and I mentioned this earlier today, the state did want to put a state bond fund in here. But a lot of people said no, because that's, you know, can be conflicting, conflicts of interest there. So the state basically gets from this is it's a long-term play. The more people you can have that can afford to retire, fund their own retirement, the less people you have relying on state benefits to get them through retirement. So this is you know, shifting more to the individual to empower them and get the momentum building for them. Yeah, it's super powerful, and as you can tell, I'm fired up about it. One day, if one person says, I remember you came in 30 years ago and talked about this thing, and now I'm able to retire, that'd be good. But just one person, that'd be fine. I'd change that thing, or my colleague, that'd be good. So other part of my job too is to come talk to employees. So if you're an employer and you roll this out and you want somebody to come educate what a 401k, or sorry, what an IRA is, I can certainly do that. Or if you're ready to go, get this up and running, you run into a hitch, or want to walk through any of the processes, you know, we're available out in the field, and we have a whole team ready to run webinars and all that kind of stuff as
Is
well.
there a cap on contribution?
Yep, so dollar amounts, from a percentage, there's no cap in percentage. You can go all the way from 1 all the way up to 100% of pay if you consume it. From a dollar perspective, because it's an IRA, it's $5,500 a year. And over the age of 50, it's an additional $1,000, so it's $6,500 in the IRA.
Okay, that was the-
Yeah. The phase out for Roth begins at people earning, if you're single earning, I think it's 121,000. So it starts to phase out how much you can contribute. It goes, I think, all up to 150 if somebody's in that area. So after 150,000, 153 maybe, they can't contribute to Roth altogether. If they're married, that gets bumped up because it's, so there is a phase out. Some people won't be able to save at all.
Darn, guys.
Yeah.
Right.
I mentioned that, but you know, that'd be a good problem to have. You know. I'm sure people in that range already understand their tax ramifications and they're probably saving for retirement by some other means.
in a different way.
Annuities.
Since we don't have an investment advisor in the room right now, like we did at Rotary today.
Yes.
Can you give us a little bit of a comparison about, you know, why this might be a better plan for people,
Yeah.
you know, at this kind of income level?
I think, so the biggest thing about this is it takes a lot of behavioral finance into consideration in the design. So any individual can go get their own IRA. And that was a major argument against starting something like this. But what we know is people are a ton more likely to save for retirement. You know, AARP says 15 to 20 times more likely, right, to save for retirement if they have a plan at work. So if you have a 401k or Oregon Saves, it's much more likely that that person is going to get their retirement savings started. So that's
And the
one.
reason is because it comes out of payroll.
Exactly.
You don't see the money, and you don't have to write the check to the bank.
Yep.
Right. So it's gone.
That's the major benefit. It's automated, you know, people adapt to the amount of income. 5% is not a whole lot of your paycheck, and most people won't notice it, and they don't have to change their lifestyle currently.
Right.
But that adds up super quickly because you have so much working for you. Dollar cost averaging, compounding interest, all that stuff is just
Professional
work.
management, yeah.
Professional management, sure. You know, the real benefit, I think, to go getting your own IRA would be, it's much more individualized. You know, also you could save in cost. A lot of times you're gonna open that with an advisor, and sometimes there can be a cap. So Edward Jones, I speak to a lot of them, they say, I need to have somebody come in and at least have $5,500 to open an IRA with me, just to even talk to them.
Right.
There's the cutoff line because we can't make any money because of our compliance and all that kind of stuff.
You
So
also
there
charge
is,
an annual fee,
and they charge an annual fee as the advisor,
and plus the percent, yeah.
plus the percent, plus the management fees.
Right.
So I think you could, from a cost perspective, go scour out there and find something, but the onus is on the individual to go find that thing and manage it themselves and continue to contribute to it, which is the hardest part, is that continuous contribution. And that's what really helps people get there. And I always say to people, you can have the best investments in the world, and you can have the lowest cost investments in the world. But if you don't save enough money, it doesn't matter at the end of the day. You know, those two things only account for about 20% of your retirement. The rest is how much you save. Got me in my soapbox. Yeah.
So is this the sheet for the employee, or is this the sheet for the employer, or is it for both?
This is more designed for the employer.
Okay.
Just because this kind of details how everything works, how it functions, how it operates. I'm very operational minded. When I was a kid, I'd take apart all my toys and figure out where the gears are and what was making sound and all that kind of stuff. So this is the sheet I like, and I always look at it from an employer perspective. We do have sheets for employees, and basically what it lines out for an employee is, if you just look at that middle section where it says flexible employee participation, it'll tell them that. You know, I think a lot of the employees, if somebody's really investment savvy, they're gonna dig in. They're gonna find everything they need online and compare it to their probably already existing investments. For everyone else, they just need to know what it means for their paycheck, and hopefully what it'll mean for their retirement account. Yeah, but we do have employee pieces. So the neat thing is if you register, we send communication directly to all employees. That's something that we do. The employers are not responsible for that, unless they want to be. We just have some employers that before they build employees, they send communication out. We're gonna start this, we're gonna build you, be on the lookout, this isn't spam. If you don't make any decision, the starting point's 5%.
And these funds, so, you know, if you buy an IRA or you set up an account, you know, you're protected within the limits that apply to the financial institution that's holding your money. this money goes to the state of Oregon's treasury. Is that right?
No,
No.
so this is privately held.
Okay.
So this goes to an independent trustee, custodian, so they hold the money.
Okay.
The state has no access to any of the money or any of the funds.
I'm thinking about security of the money, you know, if
Yeah.
if the private trustee goes bankrupt.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So the accounts are still owned by the employees. Actually, that's a great question. I don't know what would happen to the accounts. They would still exist. It's likely that they would go to another custodian or trustee.
I mean, Lehman Brothers, Morgan Stanley, I mean, people did have accounts
Yeah.
there. Government insures some investment accounts. And I guess, you know, if you're gonna be an employer and say you should put your money in this, and
Yeah.
this
What's the
is, you know,
safeguard?
sponsored by the state,
Yeah.
it's gotta be
Yeah.
safe,
Sure.
really safe, and
Yeah.
somebody has to know that.
Yeah.
And if there's a limit, they need to know, you know, sort of what.
Oh, sure. What they're, yeah. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah.
I don't know. I
Worth
don't know what would
checking, yeah.
happen if the trustee or somebody went bankrupt or something Lehman Brothers
happens.
situation. It does.
You know, these days, it has happened.
It's not a Madoff situation. There's actually money
No,
in here.
no.
It's your account. You know, it's not
Yeah,
just
it's not
shoebox
fraud,
with the money
no.
in there.
No, but I mean, you know, we went, 2008, we
Yeah.
went through this, and some people got hurt badly.
Yeah. And, you know, we're still feeling the hangover from that, for
Right,
sure. I
right.
think a lot of people too, you know, stuck with it. They bounced back.
Right. If
There's,
you didn't panic, you were probably okay.
sure, there's a lot of emotion that goes into it. It's your money, you see this stockpiling, you're relying on that for retirement. If you see the value taking a big dip,
Right.
you know, there was an advisor who I went out and presented with on 401k plans who said something really interesting. He said, to you as an investor, it's gonna feel really good to lose money, and here's how you lose money. And he said, when the dip goes down, everyone cashes out and loses all that money, and they feel good about it. Whew, I got out. But the problem is, when do you get back in?
Yeah.
You never know. So the idea is that even though it's valued at less, you're buying more shares at a lower cost down there. And if what goes down must come up. If it doesn't, the value of the dollar
We have
won't be worth
other
anything.
problems.
You might go dig a hole in Texas and live out there,
Or like,
you know, bug out, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
come to Lakeview.
Yeah. Great question, I haven't had that one before, it's very interesting. Any other questions for me? Good overview, good breakdown, makes sense?
Good, yes.
Yeah, Pretty straightforward?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect. Good, that's what I'm
Talked
glad to
in
hear.
terms that we all could understand.
I don't really, you know, you guys probably explain it better than me, so. Well, yeah, well, thank you, and then if you guys have any questions, feel free to give me or my colleagues a call. So they are based on West Coast time, 8 to 8.
And so will you find out the answer to that question?
I will, yes.
Awesome. And let somebody know, like Jessica, who can
Yeah.
spread the word?
Yeah.
Awesome.
To chamber membership.
So the trustee or custodian
Yeah.
goes belly up, what happens to the accounts? Yeah.
Or is there federal insurance, for example? I
Yeah.
mean, you know, just like, what is it?
FDIC.
FDIC for
Bank accounts.
bank accounts, but then there's an SPIC or
Yep.
something like that for security accounts.
Mhm.
And this is more on the security account side.
Sure,
And so it probably applies in the same way.
right.
But it'd
Yeah.
be worth knowing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Federally guaranteed.
Yeah, I'm surprised they don't. Yeah, sorry, that's just a big gap in my knowledge right there. I've not received that.
Somebody will know. This kind of reminds me of when they came out a few years ago for the college savings plans, the
Yeah.
529 plans. Each state had a little bit of a variation, and, you know, they were collecting money from when the kids were young, so that by the time they got to college age, you know, there was a sizable amount of investment in those, and they were investing it
Yep.
on a tax advantage basis, so.
Yeah, so we are actually, Oregon Saves is under the same umbrella
Right.
of
For that.
Oregon Saves, so it's a Oregon Savings Network. So you have retirement savings with Oregon Saves, and you have the 529, which is college savings. And then there's a third one called ABLE, and that's for people with disabilities and saving for their long-term needs.
Oh, yeah, for medical needs.
And
All on
this is-
Treasurer Read, yeah.
This is a lot like the savings growth plan, right? Yes, no?
Define savings growth plan. Is that
Oregon
the,
savings growth plan? That's what we've been hearing about, to move our, my husband's IAP
okay.
into that, or maybe it's this, the
I don't think it would be this, so is he a public employee?
state.
State, yeah, so that would be, you know, related to, I'm sure, PERS and
Right.
all the public pension, so this is for private, nothing to do with PERS. Yeah, so I you say savings growth, I know I've run up against that before, but, yeah, wouldn't think it's this, totally different.
Private, okay.
Yeah, state's not managing the funds from there, so, just the fund managers.
Good. Any more questions for me?
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to me twice.
It's always different.
You never know. Did you have some questions?
Well, no,
Somebody
it
else
was a
is gonna
different
ask.
group, and there was an investment advisor there.
Oh.
So he was asking more about, fees and costs and expenses, and I mean, you can kind of understand that because he's in that business.
Right.
Right, so he's wanting to compare, the advantage of this plan over what he's doing, and probably it's going to affect his business, because if you can participate sort of automatically on enrollment, you don't necessarily need to go to an investment advisor
Right.
unless
And pay
he's,
their
and pay
fees.
his costs, his fees, unless he's more likely than not to give you a greater return or at a lower cost or something. And so he's kind of asking questions like that, which are important questions, but it's different than these questions, so.
And I think that this is a tremendous opportunity for investment advisors as well. I mentioned Edward Jones has a bottom line that they have to have for assets to come in to have a managed IRA with them. So for an individual who's never had an IRA before, they can't go open one. They have to start somewhere. So for advisors, this would be a good opportunity for them to say, are you doing Oregon Saves? Great. Let's look at some alternatives. And if you want to me, that's what that would look like. A lot of advisors do qualified plans. They sell qualified plans. And if I was an advisor in that space, I'd say, hey, you got to do something. Let's get the conversation started. I'll help you with the rollout of this. But when you guys are ready, let's graduate to a 401k plan, and I'll be your advisor on that, and you can pay me to do that. That's the way I would approach it. So I look at it as rising tide. We're not competing. Qualified plans and
No, you're getting all those people that really couldn't afford to do it in
Right.
the first place.
yeah, or wouldn't.
And who are afraid of,
Yeah.
it, yeah,
Mhm.
that's right.
Just the momentum. Yeah, that's all we really want to do.
That's the important part,
Oh, yeah.
everybody in.
Yeah. Yep.
It's kind of the way that the healthcare reforms were meant to work, right?
Sure.
Once you get everybody in, then you stop having to pay all those emergency room visits.
Yep.
And then overall, the costs were meant to come down, and it hasn't happened yet, but the philosophy seems right.
Yeah.
This is similar.
Yeah, so insurance is supposed to work, but, some Americans have a tough time with it, I guess. It's tough to make something like that. This is just simple. Your account, you decide what to do with it, so.
Yeah, but there are limits.
Yep.
You're right, not too many choices.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, that blended sort of, planned retirement date, that's a really good feature.
Yeah.
We use that in a different plan because you don't have to think, am I taking too much risk at this age?
Yep.
Because it's already blended, the professional advisor already picks out the amount of risk. They know that you can't suffer the loss of most of your retirement money by investing in, a startup stock or something like that. So.
Right. And I think what's interesting is if you go give this presentation to a room of really young employees and ask them what type of investor they think they should be, they'll all say conservative. I'm the most conservative. I want to stick with the capital preservation.
The young
I don't
people
want
say
to
that?
lose a dime. Yep.
Really?
Just because they're not familiar with
Oh.
it's the other concepts that really build on it. It's not necessarily the short-term highs and lows. It's dollar cost averaging and compounding interest that's really going to get them there.
Yeah.
And in reality, they shouldn't care about the short-term highs and lows, right? Because they're investing for 20, 30, 40 years.
Right.
So they should be really aggressive investors, but it goes counterintuitive to what they're used to. They work really hard for their money. They want to protect it as much as possible. And they think that if they lose money, they lose it. Well, I always say you lose the value. It's valued at less, but you can buy more shares from what you've been. And then you talk to the older groups who have never done something like this, and they say they want to be aggressive. So it's the exact opposite of what these funds are trying to do. So I look at them as protecting the investor from the investor, and it's kind of emotional investing that people get into that really hurts them. They try to time the market, they hear something in the news that's inaccurate, and they time it wrong, or just make mistakes. So this is just kind of, if you stick with this, most likely all these things will work for you
In the long term.
in the long term.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.